Question number 1 asks, what is the difference between equations and inequalities? And for those who are choosing not to watch the video, they will check the study guide and you can refer back to your notes. Or this video. But basically the difference between an equation and an inequality is that an equation will have one value for x. An inequality can include that same value that the equation has for x, but it will have an ongoing set of values that is either greater than or less than that particular value for x, if a greater than or less than symbol is being used, or it may not include that same value for x, but instead would include every value greater than that value or every value less than that value. So essentially the biggest difference is that an equation only has one solution for the purposes of the problems that we're dealing with in 7th grade, and an inequality has an infinite number of solutions, at least for the purposes of what we're dealing with right now in 7th grade. Number 2, show and describe the steps needed to solve negative x over 3.2 is equal to 2.1. Now, my first step, since I have negative x over 3.2, which is the same thing as me writing x over negative 3.2, so I'm going to deal with the x over negative 3.2 because that will allow me to not only get rid of my number on the denominator, but also get rid of my negative for this fraction both in one step, equals 2.1. And we already know that to get rid of a number in the denominator, I multiply this fraction by whatever value is in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply that fraction by negative 3.2. Negative 3.2 over negative 3.2, since I have a negative over a negative, is simply a positive 1, which will allow those two to cancel each other out and drop down an x. Now our big focus for this particular unit has been balancing both sides of the equation. And so since I multiplied the left side of this equation by negative 3.2, I also need to multiply the right side by negative 3.2. And so now we're just simply multiplying two decimals. 2.1 times negative 3.2. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Bring down my 0. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. Add my values together and calculate how many spaces I need for decimals. I have 2 spaces in my original problem, so move my decimal over 2 places, and my solution should be negative because I multiplied a positive term times a negative term. So now x is equal to negative 6.72. And since the problem says not only to show, but also to describe, then I would need something over to the side in words. Step 1, multiply both sides of the equation by negative 3.2. Step 2, simplify. Step 3, identify x as equal to negative 6.72. And certainly you could have more steps if you describe each thing that is taking place in more detail.